Mom, what are you doing here in that uniform? Grant, I work here. These people are my clients. No, she looks like someone I used to know. Grant's voice tightened as he turned to the stunning woman in red beside him. Let's get that champagne, Annalise. As he brushed past his mother, their eyes met briefly. The silent plea in his was unmistakable, don't say anything. Please. Natalie felt the room spin. The son she'd raised, the boy she'd sacrificed everything for, had just pretended not to know her. Welcome back to Mock Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come through the stories we share. I want to thank each of you who has subscribed to this channel. Your support means everything. Before we begin today's story, I'd like to say a prayer for all of you watching. May your path be illuminated with wisdom, may your heart find peace in difficult moments, and may you always recognize the true value in those around you. May your burdens be lightened and your joys multiplied. Amen. Now, let me tell you about a young man who thought appearances were everything, until the day his mother disappeared and revealed a truth that would change his life forever. Dusk settled over Maplewood Heights as Natalie Pierce finished her shift, muscles aching beneath her gray uniform. 15 years of scrubbing other people's floors had left calluses on her hands that no amount of drugstore lotion could soften. She tucked a loose strand of honey-brown hair behind her ear and checked her phone. A message from her son, Grant. Can't make dinner tonight. Study group. Don't wait up. She sighed, knowing it was a lie. Her son, once so affectionate, had grown distant since starting at Westlake University. Ever since he befriended Annalise Blackwell, daughter of real estate magnate James Blackwell, Grant had become someone Natalie barely recognized. The bus lurched to a stop, and Natalie gathered her things. This was her third transfer of the evening. A 90-minute commute to save the money she would have spent on a car. Every dollar mattered when you were putting a son through Westlake University. As she walked the 4 blocks to their modest apartment, her phone rang. Mrs. Montgomery, one of her regular clients. Natalie, darling, Mrs. Montgomery's cultured voice came through the speaker. I need a special favor. We're hosting an impromptu gathering tomorrow evening. Could you possibly come by around 5? I'll pay double your usual rate. Natalie closed her eyes briefly, thinking of the plans she'd made to finally have a night to herself, a hot bath, a glass of wine, maybe watch that movie she'd been saving. Of course, Mrs. Montgomery. I'll be there. You're an angel. The caterers will handle the food, but I need someone I trust to oversee the service and keep things running smoothly. You know how particular Mr. Montgomery is about these things. I understand. Is there anything special I should prepare? Just your usual magic, dear. Make everything shine. I'll see you tomorrow. The call ended, and Natalie leaned her head back against the seat. Another Saturday evening cleaning while others celebrated. But the extra money would help with Grant's textbooks this semester. She unlocked the door to their small 2-bedroom apartment and set her bag down with a heavy sigh. The kitchen was spotless, not because Grant had cleaned it, but because he was never home to use it anymore. The refrigerator held leftover pasta from 3 nights ago. She'd made enough for both of them, hoping he might join her for dinner, but he never came home. After heating the pasta and eating alone at their small table, Natalie took out her phone and texted Grant. Just checking in. Hope your study group is going well. I made pasta if you get hungry later. Love you. She waited, watching the screen, but no reply came. With another sigh, she set the phone down and pulled out her logbook, where she kept track of her clients, schedules, and payments. Tomorrow was the Montgomery job. She'd need to be up by 4:30 a.m. to catch the first bus. The photograph on the side table caught her eye, Grant at his high school graduation, beaming with pride, his arm around her shoulders. He'd been so proud that day, telling everyone how his mom had worked 2 jobs to send him to Westlake Prep. My mom's the hardest worker in the whole world, he told his teachers. Now, at 20, he was embarrassed by the very work that had put him through private school and paid his university tuition. The first time Natalie noticed the change was 6 months ago, when she'd stopped by campus to bring him homemade cookies. She'd just finished a cleaning job nearby and thought she'd surprise him. "Really, Mom? Showing up in your cleaning clothes?" Grant had stopped her at the dormitory entrance. "Just, text next time, okay?" She'd smiled through it, handed him the cookies, and left. But something inside her cracked that day. Since then, there had been a string of incidents. She'd seen him cross the street to avoid her when she was in uniform. Heard him introduce her as his aunt at university functions. Last month, when a classmate asked about his mother's job, he'd vaguely mentioned property management. It wasn't technically a lie. She did manage properties, by cleaning them. Meanwhile, across town, Grant Pierce adjusted his navy blazer in the mirror of Annalise's bathroom. The Blackwell estate sprawled over 3 acres of manicured lawns and gardens, the kind of place he'd only seen in magazines before meeting Annalise at freshman orientation. "You look nervous," Annalise said, appearing in the doorway. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves over bare shoulders, her red dress hugging curves that made his mouth go dry. "Relax. They're just my parents' friends." "Your father's business partners, you mean?" "Including Dean Hamilton, who happens to control my scholarship committee." Grant smoothed his hair again. "This dinner could literally decide my future." Annalise wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her body against his. Through the mirror, her blue eyes held his. "You worry too much. You've already impressed my father. Why else would he invite you tonight?" Her lips found his neck, and Grant closed his eyes, letting the sensation wash over him. When he'd first met Annalise, he couldn't believe someone like her would look twice at him. Now, 4 months later, he was practically living in her world, attending galas, networking with Westlake's elite, sleeping in her bed in the east wing of the Blackwell mansion when her parents were traveling. "I just want to belong here," he whispered. "You do," she murmured against his skin. Her hands traveled lower, undoing his belt with practiced ease. "You belong with me." Later, as they lay tangled in her sheets, Grant's phone buzzed repeatedly. Annalise groaned. "Who keeps texting you? We need to leave for dinner in 20 minutes. Grant checked his phone and frowned. 3 missed calls from his mother, and now a text asking about his non-existent study group. "No one important," he said, silencing the device and tossing it aside. He kissed Annalise deeply, pulling her body beneath his. "We have 20 minutes, you say?" Annalise laughed, a sound like crystal glasses clinking. "I thought we were running late." "We are," he said, trailing kisses down her neck. "But what's life without a little risk?" By the time they finally made it downstairs, they were 30 minutes behind schedule. James Blackwell checked his watch pointedly as they entered the foyer, but his expression softened at the sight of his daughter. "Annalise, darling. You look stunning." He kissed her cheek before turning to Grant with a firm handshake. "Pierce. Good to see you again. Thank you for including me tonight, sir." Grant maintained eye contact, his grip firm, exactly as Mr. Blackwell had taught him during their first meeting. "I'm looking forward to meeting your associates." "Yes, well, we're running late. The Montgomerys are expecting us by 7. Mr. Blackwell checked his watch again. "The cars are waiting." Annalise linked her arm through Grant's as they walked outside. "We're going to the Montgomery estate," she whispered. "It's not as nice as ours, but it's impressive in that old money way. Mrs. Montgomery is on every charity board in the city." Grant nodded, taking in this information as he had absorbed so much in recent months, the unspoken rules of wealth, the subtle hierarchies, the right things to say and when to say them. It was a different world from the one he'd grown up in, where his mother worked 60-hour weeks and still clipped coupons for groceries. As they slid into the back of Mr. Blackwell's Bentley, Grant felt a twinge of guilt about ignoring his mother's calls. He should text her back, at least. But Annalise was already showing him pictures of the Montgomery estate on her phone, telling him who would be there, coaching him on what to say to Dean Hamilton about his academic interests. You can mention your economics thesis to him, she advised. Just don't bring up Professor Sawyer, they had some academic feud last year. Grant nodded, absorbing this information like a sponge. This was his world now, or it would be, if he played his cards right. And none of it would be possible if people knew the truth, that his mother cleaned houses for a living, that he'd grown up in a tiny apartment in the east side of town, that his private school education had come at the cost of his mother working herself to exhaustion. By the way, Annalise said, her voice casual as she checked her makeup in a compact mirror, what exactly does your mother do again? Daddy was asking earlier. Grant's heart skipped. She's in property management, he said smoothly, the lie coming easier each time he told it. She oversees domestic operations for several estates. Annalise tilted her head. Daddy mentioned something about her working for someone he knows. I thought maybe she was in real estate or something. Cold dread pooled in Grant's stomach. Who does he think she works for? I don't remember the name. Some family friend. She snapped her compact shut. It's not important. I just told him I'd ask since he was curious. Grant forced a smile. Nothing interesting to tell, really. Just boring property stuff. As the car turned onto a tree-lined drive leading to the Montgomery estate, Grant pushed thoughts of his mother aside. Tonight was about his future, about securing his place in this world. He couldn't let anything distract from that goal. What Grant couldn't know was that his carefully constructed new life was about to collide with the one he'd been trying so hard to leave behind. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and subscribe for more eye-opening tales about life's most important lessons. Remember, your support helps this channel grow, and I'm grateful for each of you who takes the time to engage with these stories. The Montgomery estate gleamed in the evening light as caterers bustled through the grand entrance. Natalie moved efficiently through the back rooms, polishing silver and arranging fresh flowers. She'd arrived at 3 o'clock, 2 hours before her scheduled time, wanting everything to be perfect. Natalie, you've outdone yourself, Mrs. Montgomery said, sweeping into the dining room in a shimmering blue gown. The place looks absolutely divine. Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery. Natalie smiled, smoothing down her gray uniform. The flowers just came in. I thought the white orchids would complement your china. Perfectly chosen, as always. Mrs. Montgomery glanced at her diamond watch. The first guests should arrive in about 30 minutes. Remember what we discussed. Stay in the kitchen until dinner begins, Natalie finished. Then just keep everything tidy and refill drinks as needed. You're a treasure. Mrs. Montgomery touched her arm briefly. There's fresh coffee in the kitchen if you need a moment to yourself before the chaos begins. As Mrs. Montgomery glided away, Natalie took a deep breath. These events always brought a mix of emotions, pride in her work, satisfaction in a job well done, but also a stark reminder of the divide between her world and the one she cleaned for. She had just finished setting up the dining room when voices in the foyer announced the first guest's arrival. Following Mrs. Montgomery's instructions, she slipped through the service door into the spacious kitchen. The caterers worked with practiced precision, plating appetizers and chilling champagne. The Montgomery crystal needs one final polish, the head caterer told her. Could you handle that while we finish the hors d'oeuvres? Natalie nodded, taking the stack of crystal flutes to the sink. As she carefully polished each glass, she allowed herself to daydream. Perhaps someday Grant would attend parties like this as a guest, not as the son of the help. That was why she worked so hard, after all, so he could have opportunities she never had. She was arranging dessert plates when the kitchen door swung open, and a familiar voice made her freeze. Told you I know where everything is. Mrs. Montgomery won't mind if I grab us some champagne before dinner. Grant stopped cold when he saw his mother, still in her gray uniform, holding a stack of fine china. Mom. What are you doing here? Before Natalie could answer, a stunning young woman in a red dress appeared behind Grant. Babe, what's taking so? Annalise stopped, her gaze traveling from Grant to Natalie and back again. You know the help. Natalie watched the color drain from her son's face, replaced by something worse, panic, then determination. No, she looks like someone I used to know. Grant's voice was tight. Let's get that champagne. As he brushed past Natalie to the wine fridge, their eyes met briefly. The silent plea in his was unmistakable, don't say anything. Please. Natalie felt the room spin. The son she'd raised, the boy she'd sacrificed everything for, had just pretended not to know her. Grant, she said softly, but he was already guiding Annalise out, champagne bottle in hand, without a backward glance. Natalie steadied herself against the counter, breathing deeply. She had a job to do. She would get through this evening with dignity, and tomorrow she would deal with her shattered heart. Are you all right, Mrs. Pierce? One of the younger caterers asked. You look pale. I'm fine, Natalie said automatically, though she felt anything but fine. Just a bit tired. I'll be all right. She busied herself with final preparations as voices and laughter filled the house. Through the kitchen door, she could hear the melodic chime of crystal glasses and the murmur of wealthy conversation. Soon, she would need to begin service, moving among these people who now included her son. Dinner was excruciating. From his seat beside Annalise, Grant watched his mother silently refill water glasses and clear plates, her face a careful mask. He barely tasted the exquisite food, his stomach nodding each time she approached the table. So, Grant, James Blackwell's voice cut through his thoughts. Annalise tells me you're top of your class in economics. Impressive, especially considering your background. There was something probing in Mr. Blackwell's gaze that made Grant uneasy. Did he know about Natalie? Had Annalise mentioned their awkward kitchen encounter? I've always been motivated, sir. Grant forced a smile. My mother instilled a strong work ethic in me from a young age. Did she now? Mr. Blackwell swirled his wine. And what does she do, exactly? I don't believe you've ever mentioned her profession. The table fell quiet, all eyes on Grant. From the corner of his eye, he saw his mother pause while collecting bread baskets. She's in property management, Grant said smoothly, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from Natalie. She oversees domestic operations for several estates. It wasn't technically a lie, he told himself as conversation resumed. She did manage properties, by cleaning them. But saying that in this room, to these people. Property management, Dean Hamilton nodded approvingly. A respectable field. Is she with one of the larger firms? She's independent, Grant said, taking a large sip of wine. Works with a select clientele. Perhaps she knows my associate at Westlake Properties, Mr. Blackwell pressed. We're always looking for good management talent. Grant felt trapped, aware that his mother was still standing frozen near the sideboard. I can ask her, he managed. Though I believe she's quite content with her current arrangements. As his mother disappeared into the kitchen, Grant caught Mrs. Montgomery studying him with a strange expression. More wine, Grant? Annalise asked, her hand finding his beneath the table and squeezing reassuringly. Please, he said, forcing a smile. The conversation shifted to university politics, much to Grant's relief. He participated just enough to seem engaged, but his mind kept returning to the look in his mother's eyes when he pretended not to know her. He'd never seen her look so broken. When dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate soufflé, Grant noticed his mother was no longer among the serving staff. Perhaps she'd left early. The thought brought both relief and a deeper sense of shame. After dinner, the party moved to the garden for drinks. Grant was midway through a conversation with Dean Hamilton about summer internships when his phone vibrated. A text from his mother, I've finished my work. We need to talk. I'll wait by the service entrance. Excuse me, Grant mumbled to the dean. I need to make a call. He found his mother sitting on a bench near the staff parking area, still in her uniform, looking smaller than he remembered. What were you thinking? He hissed, keeping his voice low. You couldn't have given me some warning. Natalie looked up, her eyes reflecting the same strength she'd shown his entire life. I didn't know you'd be here, Grant. I was called in at the last minute. Well, it was humiliating. The words spilled out before he could stop them. Do you have any idea what these connections mean for my future? For our future. And you just show up in your, he gestured at her uniform. In my what, Grant? My work clothes. The uniform that paid for your education. Natalie stood, her voice steady but eyes brimming. I have never been ashamed of my work. Not once in 15 years. But tonight, for the first time ever, I felt ashamed. Not of my job, of you. The words hit Grant like a physical blow. Mom, I didn't mean. Yes, you did. She gathered her bag. I raised you to be honest, hardworking, and kind. The man I saw tonight was none of those things. As she walked toward the bus stop, Grant stood frozen, torn between running after her and returning to the party where Annalise and opportunities awaited. The garden door opened, spilling golden light and laughter onto the lawn. Grant? Annalise called. Everyone's looking for you. Daddy wants to discuss summer internships. After one last look at his mother's retreating figure, Grant turned back toward the mansion. Coming, he called, pushing down the guilt threatening to consume him. Back inside, Mr. Blackwell pulled Grant aside, clapping a heavy hand on his shoulder. Pierce, I've been discussing your prospects with Hamilton. He's impressed with your academic record. Thank you, sir. Grant straightened his shoulders, forcing himself to focus. The thing is, Mr. Blackwell leaned closer, his voice dropping, connections matter in our world. Who you know, who your family knows. It opens doors that might otherwise remain closed. Grant nodded, unsure where this was heading. What I'm saying, Mr. Blackwell continued, is that sometimes our origins can be limiting. But with the right sponsorship, those limitations can be overcome. He smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. I'm prepared to offer that sponsorship, Grant. A guaranteed position at Blackwell Enterprises after graduation, with potential for rapid advancement. Grant's heart raced. This was exactly what he'd been working toward, the opportunity to enter this world permanently, to secure his future. I don't know what to say, sir. Say yes, Mr. Blackwell laughed. And perhaps arrange for me to meet this mother of yours sometime. I'm curious about the woman who raised such a promising young man. A cold feeling spread through Grant's chest. Of course, sir. I'm sure she'd be honored. Excellent. We'll discuss details later. Now, I believe my daughter is looking for you. As Mr. Blackwell walked away, Grant released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Across the room, Mrs. Montgomery was watching him, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, she smiled slightly and raised her glass in his direction. Annalise found him moments later, slipping her arm through his. So. Did Daddy offer you the job? You knew about that? Of course I knew. She beamed up at him. It was my idea. I told him you were perfect for the company. Brilliant, ambitious, moldable. She kissed his cheek. I've been grooming you for months. Grooming me? Grant repeated, something uncomfortable stirring in his gut. Annalise laughed. Don't look so shocked. I saw potential in you from the start. A diamond in the rough, Daddy calls it. All you needed was some polish. She leaned closer, whispering in his ear. And now you're practically one of us. Grant forced a smile, though the words left him feeling hollow. A diamond in the rough. Moldable. Was that all he was to her? To all of them. By the way, she continued, seemingly oblivious to his discomfort, that server you were talking to earlier, the older woman. Who is she? Grant's mouth went dry. Just someone who looked familiar. I was mistaken. Annalise studied him for a moment. Well, we should get going. Daddy has an early meeting tomorrow. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Montgomery approached them, her silk gown rustling softly. Grant, dear, could I have a quick word before you go? Of course, Mrs. Montgomery. He followed her to a quiet corner of the room, anxiety building in his chest. I just wanted to make sure everything is all right, she said, her voice gentle. Natalie left rather suddenly, and she seemed upset. Grant's heart pounded. Natalie? Mrs. Montgomery's gaze was knowing. Grant, I've known Natalie Pierce for over 10 years. She's cleaned my home every week since before you started high school. She paused, studying his face. She's been an invaluable help to me, and I consider her a friend. Which is why I was surprised to see her son pretend not to know her at my dinner party. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. Mrs. Montgomery, She held up a hand, stopping him. I'm not here to judge you, Grant. But I want you to know that your mother is one of the most dignified, hardworking people I know. She's spoken of you with such pride over the years. Her expression softened. We all want better for our children, dear. But be careful not to lose yourself while reaching for success. Before Grant could respond, she squeezed his arm gently and walked away, leaving him with a crushing weight of shame. The ride back to the Blackwell estate passed in a blur. Annalise chattered excitedly about summer plans and the internship her father had promised Grant, while he nodded at appropriate intervals, his mind elsewhere. You're awfully quiet, she finally said as the car pulled through the estate gates. Aren't you excited about the offer? Of course, he assured her. It's just been a long evening. A lot to process. Well, process it tomorrow. Tonight, we're celebrating. She kissed him deeply as the car stopped, then pulled back with a smile. Come up to my room. My parents are staying in the city tonight. Grant followed her inside, his body on autopilot. As Annalise disappeared into her bathroom to freshen up, he checked his phone. No messages from his mother. He started to type, an apology, an explanation, but the words felt hollow. What could he possibly say to make things right? Annalise emerged wearing nothing but a silk robe, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. Any other night, the sight would have made his heart race. Tonight, he felt numb. What's wrong? She asked, coming to stand before him. You've been distant all evening. Grant hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. That woman at the Montgomerys, the one in the kitchen. She wasn't someone I thought I knew. She was my mother. Annalise froze, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding. The server? That was your mother? She sat beside him on the bed. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed, Grant admitted, the words burning his throat. She cleans houses for a living. She's not in property management. She's a housekeeper. Annalise was quiet for a moment. I see. And you thought, what? That I wouldn't want to be with you if I knew your mother was a maid? Wouldn't you? Grant challenged. Would your father still have offered me that job if he knew? Annalise's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, Grant said bitterly. You said it yourself, your father wants someone moldable. Someone he can shape into the right kind of person for his world. And the son of a housekeeper doesn't fit that description, does he? Grant, that's not fair. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, he interrupted. You liked the version of me I presented. The ambitious scholarship student with potential. Not the kid who grew up in a tiny apartment while his mom scrubbed toilets to pay for his education. Annalise's expression hardened. Is that really what you think of me? That I'm that shallow? Grant ran a hand through his hair, suddenly exhausted. I don't know what to think anymore. I just know that I hurt my mother tonight. Deeply. And for what? So I could keep pretending to be someone I'm not. So what are you going to do? Annalise asked, her voice small. I need to go home. I need to talk to her, to apologize. He stood, gathering his jacket. I'm sorry, Annalise. Not tonight. As he headed for the door, she called after him. Grant? If you leave now, I'm not sure where that leaves us. He paused, hand on the doorknob. I'm not sure either. But I need to make things right with my mother before I can figure anything else out. The drive to his apartment was long, giving Grant time to think. He'd been so focused on fitting into Annalise's world that he'd lost sight of who he really was, and who had helped him get this far. His mother deserved better than his shameful behavior tonight. But when he finally reached their apartment, it was dark and empty. His mother's bed was neatly made, her room undisturbed. No note, no message. Nothing to indicate where she might have gone. Grant sank onto the couch, a deep sense of foreboding settling over him. He'd hurt her worse than he realized. And now she was gone. If you're finding this story impactful, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support means everything to this channel, and it helps these important stories reach more people who might need to hear them. Now, let's continue with our tale of pride, regret, and redemption. 3 days passed without word from his mother. Grant's calls went to voicemail, his texts unanswered. By Wednesday, concern began to overshadow his anger. It wasn't like her to disappear, especially not without canceling her cleaning jobs. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet as Grant paced from room to room, checking his phone every few minutes. He'd barely attended classes, spending most of his time either waiting at home or driving around to places his mother frequented, her favorite coffee shop, the library where she sometimes read during breaks between jobs, even the bus stops along her usual routes. Nothing. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. Annalise. He'd been avoiding her calls since leaving the Blackwell mansion 3 nights ago, but perhaps it was time to talk. Hey, he answered, his voice rough from lack of sleep. Finally, Annalise sighed. I was starting to think you'd disappeared too. Sorry. I've been preoccupied. Still no word from your mother. Her voice softened with what sounded like genuine concern. Nothing. It's not like her, Annalise. She's never gone this long without contact. Maybe she's teaching you a lesson, Annalise suggested. My mother once didn't speak to me for a week when I maxed out her credit card. Grant shook his head, forgetting she couldn't see him. It's not that simple. Something's wrong. She never misses work. So she finally took a vacation. Good for her. Annalise's tone shifted to something lighter. Look, why don't you come over? Lounging by the pool always helps me think more clearly. I can't just relax while my mother is missing. Grant, be reasonable. She's a grown woman who's probably taking some time for herself. Besides, didn't you tell me you've been encouraging her to find a better job? Maybe she listened. Grant frowned. He had suggested, repeatedly, that she look for more respectable work. Had she finally taken his advice? Without telling him. I need to check something, he said. I'll call you back. He hung up before she could protest and began searching through his mother's room again. Everything looked exactly as it had for years, the neatly made bed with its faded quilt, the small dresser with carefully folded clothes, the bedside table with her reading glasses and... The photo frame was missing. The silver frame that had always held a picture of the two of them at his high school graduation, the one she treasured most, was gone. A cold feeling spread through Grant's chest. If she had left voluntarily, she'd taken that one meaningful possession. But where would she go? They had no other family, no close friends outside of town. The only place that came to mind was the mountain cabin they'd rented for summer vacations when he was younger, but they hadn't been there in years. Did it even still exist? Panic rising, Grant called Mrs. Montgomery. "Grant, dear," she answered warmly. "I was hoping you'd call. Mrs. Montgomery, have you heard from my mother? She's been gone for days." A pause. "I haven't heard from Natalie since Saturday," she confirmed. "It's not like her at all. I've been quite worried myself. She missed her Monday appointment with me, first time in 10 years. Did she mention anything that night? About going somewhere?" Another pause. "No, but she seemed upset after your encounter." "Grant, why didn't you tell me Natalie was your mother?" Grant's throat tightened. "I need to file a missing person report," he said, avoiding her question. "Thank you for your help." "Grant, wait," but he had already hung up, grabbing his car keys. At the police station, Officer Davis took down the information with professional detachment. Name, age, description, last known whereabouts. He frowned when Grant mentioned the 3-day absence. "Adults go missing by choice all the time," the officer explained. "Especially after family disagreements. Give it a few more days." "You don't understand," Grant insisted. "My mother wouldn't just leave without telling anyone. Something's happened to her." "Any history of mental health issues? Depression? Substance abuse?" "No, nothing like that." Grant's frustration mounted. "She's reliable, responsible. She wouldn't just vanish." Officer Davis nodded, typing something into his computer. "We'll put out an alert, but honestly, most adults return home on their own within a week. Keep trying her phone, check with her friends, her workplace. She'll likely turn up." But days stretched into a week with no word. Grant's worry morphed into a gnawing fear that kept him awake at night and distracted during classes. He'd called every hospital in the area, checked accident reports, even visited homeless shelters on the slim chance she might have suffered some kind of breakdown or memory loss. Nothing. Annalise's patience began to wear thin. "You need to pull yourself together," she said one night as they lay in her bed, his body unresponsive to her advances. "This obsession with finding your mother is becoming unhealthy." "She's all I have," Grant whispered, staring at the ceiling. Before all of this, she was my entire world." Annalise propped herself up on one elbow, studying him. "You know what I think? I think she saw us that night and realized you've outgrown her. She couldn't handle that you belong in this world now, my world, so she left before you could leave her." The words hit uncomfortably close to his deepest fears. Had he pushed his mother away with his ambition, his shame, his new life? "I need to find her," he said, sitting up. "I need to make this right." Annalise sighed, running a hand down his bare back. "If it helps you focus, I'll ask Daddy to hire a private investigator. His firm uses them all the time for background checks." Grant turned to her, surprised by the offer. "You do that?" "Of course," she smiled, pulling him back down beside her. "I take care of what's mine." The possessive note in her voice would have once thrilled him. Now, it left him vaguely uneasy. But he was too desperate to question the help. The next morning, Grant met with James Blackwell in his downtown office. The older man was surprisingly accommodating. Annalise explained the situation, Mr. Blackwell said, gesturing for Grant to sit. "I've already contacted Frank Walsh, former police detective. He's the best in the business." "Thank you, sir." "I don't know what to say." "No need for thanks." Mr. Blackwell waved a dismissive hand. "Consider it an investment in your peace of mind. And in your future with us." There it was again, that subtle reminder that all this help came with strings attached. But what choice did he have? "Walsh will want to meet with you directly," Mr. Blackwell continued. "I've given him your number. In the meantime, try to focus on your studies." The Montgomery Fellowship applications are due next week, and I'd like you to be at your best. Grant had completely forgotten about the fellowship, a prestigious award that would guarantee him a position at Montgomery Developments after graduation. It had been his primary goal just a week ago. Now, it seemed trivial compared to finding his mother. "I'll do my best, sir." Mr. Blackwell nodded, already turning back to his computer. "See that you do. Annalise has high expectations for you." "We all do." As Grant left the towering office building, his phone rang, an unknown number. "Grant Pierce. Frank Walsh here. I understand you're looking for your mother." "Yes, thank you for taking the case." Relief flooded Grant's voice. "I'll need to meet with you, get some background information. How about the coffee shop on 5th and Pine in an hour?" "I'll be there." The coffee shop was quiet for a weekday morning. Walsh was easy to spot, a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He shook Grant's hand firmly. "Tell me about your mother," he said without preamble. "Not just when she disappeared, everything. Her routines, her habits, her relationships." For the next hour, Grant talked about his mother's work schedule, her few friends, her dedication to her job and to him. About how she never took vacations, never called in sick, never spent money on herself if it could go toward his education instead. "And this argument you had, at the Montgomery estate. What exactly was said?" Grant's face heated with shame as he recounted the conversation. How he'd pretended not to know her. How he'd berated her afterward for embarrassing him. "She said she was ashamed of me," he finished quietly. "Not of her work, of me. Then she walked away, and I let her go." Walsh nodded, his expression neutral. "Do you have a recent photo?" Grant pulled out his phone, showing him a picture from Christmas, his mother in a red sweater, smiling beside their small tree. "Good. I'll need access to your apartment, to check for anything that might give us a clue about where she went. And her financial information, bank accounts, credit cards, that sort of thing. I have keys to the apartment, but I don't know much about her finances. She always handled that. I'll find out." Walsh stood, finishing his coffee. "One more thing. Has anyone else been asking about your mother recently? Anyone showing unusual interest in her whereabouts?" Grant frowned. "Not that I know of." "Why do you ask?" Standard question. Walsh's tone was casual, but his eyes were watchful. People don't usually vanish without a trace unless they're running from something, or someone. The thought sent a chill through Grant. What if his mother hadn't left voluntarily? What if someone had taken her, hurt her? "I'll be in touch soon," Walsh promised. "In the meantime, keep your phone on. And be careful who you talk to about this. Sometimes the people closest to us aren't who we think they are." With that cryptic warning, Walsh left, leaving Grant with a growing sense of unease. That evening, Grant returned to their apartment, intending to collect some of his mother's personal items for Walsh to examine. As he unlocked the door, he had the distinct feeling that something was different. Nothing obvious, just a sense that things had been disturbed in his absence. He moved cautiously through the rooms, checking for signs of a break-in. Nothing seemed missing, but when he reached his mother's bedroom, he noticed her closet door was slightly ajar. He was certain he'd closed it during his last search. Opening it fully, he realized several of her shirts were missing, not many, just enough that someone familiar with her wardrobe would notice. Her small travel bag was gone too, along with her backup phone charger. Had she returned while he was out? Or had someone else been here, taking her things? Grant called Walsh immediately, reporting his findings. "That's actually good news," Walsh told him. "Suggests she left voluntarily and has come back for supplies. Means she's okay, just staying somewhere else. But why wouldn't she contact me if she came back? That's what we need to find out." Walsh paused. "I've been checking into her finances. There's something interesting there. I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you meet tomorrow morning? Same place, 9 a.m. I'll be there, Grant promised. He hung up, relief battling with confusion. His mother was likely safe, that was the most important thing. But why the secrecy? Why disappear without a word, then sneak back for her belongings while he was out? The answer came in an unexpected form later that night. Grant was flipping through channels, trying to distract himself, when a familiar name caught his attention. The local news was featuring a story about Montgomery Development's newest project, a luxury housing complex that had just received final approval from the city council. This project represents a significant investment in our community, Harold Montgomery was saying to reporters. We're particularly proud of the sustainability features and the affordable housing component. The camera panned to show Mrs. Montgomery standing beside her husband, smiling proudly. And next to her, Grant leaned forward in disbelief, was a woman who looked remarkably like his mother, but in an elegant business suit instead of a maid's uniform, her hair styled differently, her posture more commanding. The caption beneath her read, Natalie Reed, silent partner, Montgomery Developments. Grant scrambled for the remote, rewinding the digital broadcast. There was no mistake. The woman was his mother, or someone who looked exactly like her, being introduced as a partner in one of the city's most prestigious development firms. Before he could process this bizarre sight, his phone buzzed with a text from Walsh, turn on channel 7. Then call me. Grant's hands trembled as he dialed. That's her. That's my mother. But I don't understand. Neither do I, Walsh admitted. But I think we're about to find out. I've been digging into your mother's finances, and what I've found doesn't match the profile of a housekeeper. Meet me tomorrow as planned. And Grant? Don't mention this to anyone else. Not even Annalise Blackwell. The warning sent another wave of unease through Grant. Why would Walsh specifically mention Annalise? Sleep was impossible that night. Grant kept replaying the news clip in his mind, trying to reconcile the elegant businesswoman with the mother he'd known his entire life. The mother who worked 60-hour weeks cleaning other people's homes. The mother he'd been ashamed of. By morning, he was exhausted but determined. He arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, ordering a strong black coffee and claiming a corner table where he could watch the door. Walsh arrived precisely at 9, carrying a manila folder. He sat across from Grant, his expression grave. Before I show you what I've found, I need to know something. How much do you really know about your mother's background? Her family, her education, her life before you were born. Grant frowned. Not much, honestly. Her parents died before I was born. She married my father young, and he died when I was 5. Car accident. She never talked much about her past. Walsh nodded, as though this confirmed something. That's what I thought. He opened the folder and slid a newspaper clipping across the table. Grant's heart pounded as he read the headline, Tech heiress Natalie Reed announces engagement to Thomas Pierce. Below was a photo of his mother, much younger, but unmistakably her, alongside a handsome man Grant recognized from the few photos he had of his father. They were at some kind of gala, his mother in an evening gown, his father in a tuxedo. I don't understand, Grant whispered. Tech heiress. Your mother was Natalie Reed, only child of George Reed, founder of Reed Technologies. When he died, she inherited everything, the company, the fortune, all of it. According to my sources, she was worth approximately $200 million at the age of 23. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. That's impossible. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment. She takes the bus to work. She cleans houses for a living. By choice, it seems. Walsh tapped a newspaper clipping featuring a younger Natalie in business attire, shaking hands with a man Grant recognized as Mrs. Montgomery's husband. The headline read, Tech heiress Natalie Reed merges fortune with Montgomery Developments. Reed was her maiden name, Grant murmured, his mind racing to process this revelation. Your mother inherited Reed Technologies when she was 23. She married Thomas Pierce shortly after, and you were born a year later. Walsh consulted his notes. After your father died when you were 5, she merged Reed Tech with Montgomery Developments but insisted on keeping a low profile. According to my sources, she's worth approximately $1.2 billion. Grant's coffee sat forgotten, growing cold. That's impossible. It's not only possible, it's true. Walsh pulled out more documents, property deeds, financial statements, board meeting minutes. Natalie Pierce is much more than a housekeeper. She's the silent majority shareholder in Montgomery Developments, Westlake Properties, and, most interestingly, Blackwell Enterprises. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Blackwell Enterprises? As in, James Blackwell? Annalise's father? Walsh nodded grimly. Your mother owns 40% of Blackwell's company. And according to my sources, he's been trying to buy her out for years. Unsuccessfully. Grant's mind raced, pieces falling into place. Mr. Blackwell's strange questions about his mother. The job offer that seemed too good to be true. Annalise's interest in him, a scholarship student with seemingly no connections. Are you saying that Annalise? He couldn't finish the question. I'm not saying anything definitive, Walsh cautioned. But the timing of your relationship with Miss Blackwell, followed by her father's sudden interest in your career, seems convenient. Grant felt sick. Had it all been a setup? A way to get close to his mother through him? Where is she now? He asked, his voice rough. That I don't know for certain, Walsh admitted. She boarded a private jet to the Cayman Islands on Sunday morning, but there's no record of her arrival. It's like she disappeared mid-flight. Or changed destinations, Grant muttered, his mind racing. The cabin they'd vacationed in every summer until he started high school, could she have gone there? He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Thank you for your help. One more thing, Walsh called as Grant turned to leave. You should know that James Blackwell hired me to find your mother just hours after you did. Grant froze. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't like being played. Blackwell knew exactly who your mother was when he hired me. He was hoping I'd lead him to her before you found her. And now? Now I've told you both the same thing, that I've hit a dead end. What you do with this information is up to you. But whatever's going on, Mr. Pierce, be careful who you trust. Grant nodded, his mind already plotting his next move. The mountain cabin was a 5-hour drive north. If he left now, he could be there by late afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. For everything. Walsh gave him a knowing look. Good luck finding her, son. I think you both have a lot to talk about. As Grant walked to his car, his phone buzzed with a text from Annalise. Daddy says the investigator hasn't found anything yet. Don't worry, we'll keep looking. Coming over tonight? XO. For the first time, Grant saw the message for what it might really be, not comfort, but surveillance. Keeping tabs on him while her father searched for his mother. He typed a quick reply, can't tonight. Meeting with advisors about fellowship application. Talk tomorrow. The lie came easily, just as his lies about his mother had. But this time, the deception served a different purpose. He needed time to find his mother, to hear her side of the story, to understand the life she'd hidden from him for 20 years. As he drove north toward the mountains, leaving the city behind, Grant couldn't help wondering what other secrets would be revealed before this was over. If this story is touching your heart or making you think, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these important messages reach more people who might need to hear them. And remember, sometimes the truth we're running from is exactly what we need to face. Now, let's continue our journey with Grant as he searches for his mother and the truth about his life. The mountain roads grew steeper as Grant drove higher into the pine-covered hills. His GPS had lost signal an hour ago, but he remembered the way. Past the small town of Pinecrest, up the winding road where cell service disappeared, then right at the fork marked only by a weathered wooden sign. The cabin looked exactly as Grant remembered, a modest two-bedroom retreat nestled among towering pines. No luxury cars in the driveway, no signs of wealth. Just the simple place where he and his mother had spent their happiest days. He parked beside a familiar blue Toyota, his mother's car, the one she drove to cleaning jobs. The one he'd been embarrassed to be seen in at university events. The porch steps creaked under his weight, just as they always had. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What would he say? How could he begin to address the lifetime of questions that now churned in his mind? Before he could decide, the door opened. His mother stood there, wrapped in a faded quilt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "How did you find me?" she asked as he stood frozen on the threshold. "I remembered," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "Why didn't you tell me?" She sighed, stepping back to let him in. "Come inside. It's getting cold." The cabin's interior was exactly as he remembered, rustic furniture, a stone fireplace, faded rugs on hardwood floors. No marble countertops, no crystal chandeliers. Nothing that suggested its owner was one of the wealthiest women in the state. His mother settled into an armchair by the fire, tucking the quilt around her legs. Grant remained standing, unable to reconcile this familiar woman with the businesswoman he'd seen on television, or with the billionaire Walsh had described. "I've spent the last week thinking about what I would say if you found me," she began, her voice steady. "How I would explain. But now that you're here, I don't know where to start." "The truth would be nice," Grant said, more sharply than he intended. "Maybe beginning with why my billionaire mother has been scrubbing toilets for a living." She winced at his tone but met his gaze directly. "I never lied to you, Grant. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the definition of lying by omission." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "My whole life, I thought we were barely getting by. I worked 2 jobs in high school to help with expenses. I felt guilty about every penny you spent on my education. And all that time, you could have bought the entire university if you wanted to. Would that have been better?" she asked quietly. "If I'd raised you surrounded by wealth and privilege? If I'd handed you everything instead of letting you earn it? Better than living a lie?" "Yes." His mother shook her head. "What was I supposed to say? By the way, Grant, I'm secretly a billionaire, but I choose to scrub toilets because it keeps me humble." "Yes. Exactly that." Grant couldn't keep the frustration from his voice. "I spent years ashamed of what you did for a living, and it was all an act." "It was never an act." Natalie turned to face him, her eyes fierce. "I clean houses because honest work keeps me connected to reality. Because I never wanted you to grow up entitled and shallow, like so many children of wealth. I wanted you to value people for who they are, not what they own." The irony wasn't lost on Grant. "Well, that backfired spectacularly, didn't it? I've been dating Annalise Blackwell precisely because of her family's wealth and connections." "Have you?" Natalie's gaze was knowing. "Or do you genuinely care for her?" Grant thought about Annalise, her laughter, her ambition, the vulnerability she showed only to him. "I don't know anymore. Especially after what the investigator told me about her father." "James has been trying to acquire my shares for years," Natalie confirmed. "I've always refused. The Montgomery partnership gives me enough influence to block his more unethical development projects." "Did you know I was seeing his daughter?" "Not until I saw you together at the Montgomery dinner." Natalie's voice softened. "I wondered if it was coincidence or if I was being used." Grant finished bitterly. "I've been asking myself the same question since I learned the truth." He finally sank into the couch opposite her, suddenly exhausted. Why the cleaning jobs? Of all the ways you could have maintained a normal life, why choose that? Natalie was quiet for a moment, watching the fire. After your father died, I was devastated. He had been my partner in everything, the business, our marriage, raising you. Suddenly, I was alone with a 5-year-old son and a company that demanded all my attention. She leaned forward, her eyes distant with memory. One day, about a year after Tom died, I attended a board meeting. The directors were discussing layoffs, hundreds of employees who would lose their livelihoods so we could improve our quarterly numbers. They talked about these people as if they were just entries on a spreadsheet. What did you do? I fired the board instead, she said with a small smile. But it was a wake-up call. I realized how easy it would be to lose touch with reality, with what matters. I decided then that I would raise you differently. That you would understand the value of hard work, of treating people with dignity regardless of their position. So you started cleaning houses? Grant still couldn't quite wrap his mind around it. Not immediately. First, I merged Reed Technologies with Montgomery Developments. Harold had been your father's friend and shared our values. I became a silent partner, keeping my involvement private. And yes, I started cleaning houses. At first, just as a way to stay grounded. Then I found I actually enjoyed the work, the simplicity of it, the tangible results, the connections with people. But you didn't have to actually live like we were struggling, Grant protested. We could have had a better apartment, a newer car. You worked yourself to exhaustion for years. Natalie shook her head. If I'd given us a more comfortable life, the lesson would have been hollow. You needed to see the reality that most people live with, the genuine struggles, the genuine rewards. So my entire life has been some kind of elaborate object lesson. Grant stood again, anger flaring. Did you ever consider that maybe I didn't need that lesson? That maybe I would have been a decent person anyway? Of course you would have, Natalie said softly. You're your father's son. But the world we live in, the world of wealth and privilege, it changes people, Grant. It isolates them from reality. I've seen it happen to good people, again and again. Like James Blackwell? Grant asked, thinking of Annalise's father with his calculating eyes and too firm handshake. James wasn't always as he is now, Natalie said, surprising him. When I first met him, he was idealistic, ambitious in the best way. He wanted to build communities, not just luxury developments. But success changed him. Bit by bit, project by project, he compromised his values for profit. And that's what you were afraid would happen to me? I was afraid you would never know who you truly are, she corrected gently. That you would define yourself by your possessions, your connections, your status, not by your character. Grant sank back onto the couch, the anger draining away, replaced by a profound weariness. I think I've already done that, he admitted. The way I treated you at the Montgomery dinner. I was so afraid of losing my place in that world that I denied my own mother. We all make mistakes, Grant. What matters is how we learn from them. They sat in silence as darkness fell, the weight of secrets and mistakes hanging between them. I'm sorry, Mom, Grant finally whispered. For being ashamed. For pretending not to know you. For everything. Natalie reached for his hand. I'm sorry too, for keeping secrets. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was just afraid of losing you to that world. You won't lose me, Grant promised, squeezing her hand. But I need to know who I am now. Who we are. And what to do about Annalise. Do you love her? Natalie asked simply. Grant considered the question. I think I could. If what we have is real. Then find out, his mother advised. But this time, be honest about who you are. All of who you are. Grant nodded slowly. When are you coming home? Soon. She smiled, looking more like herself than she had in days. I have a few things to take care of first. Board meetings to attend, projects to review. As Natalie Reed, the businesswoman. As Natalie Pierce, she corrected. The woman who happens to be both a billionaire and a housekeeper. Both are equally part of who I am. Grant studied his mother's face, seeing it clearly perhaps for the first time. The strength that had supported them both through years of supposed struggle. The wisdom that had guided him, even when he resisted. The dignity that had never wavered, even when he denied her. You know, he said slowly, when I was younger, I used to tell everyone you were the hardest working person in the world. I guess I was right all along. Her smile was worth every mile of the journey to find her. 2 weeks later, Grant stood in the Blackwell Mansion's foyer, waiting for Annalise. After returning to campus, he'd maintained their relationship but kept a careful emotional distance, watching for signs that she knew about his mother's true identity. He'd spent those weeks thinking deeply about what he wanted, and who he wanted to be. His conversations with his mother had continued, long talks by the cabin's fire about family history, business ethics, and the responsibility that came with privilege. Natalie had returned to the city a few days after his visit, resuming both her cleaning schedule and her duties as a silent partner at Montgomery Developments. When Grant had asked why she continued cleaning houses when she no longer needed to hide, she'd smiled. Because it grounds me, she'd said simply. Because it reminds me of what's real. And because Mrs. Montgomery has a dinner party next weekend, and heaven knows Harold can't handle the table settings without me. Footsteps on the grand staircase pulled Grant from his thoughts. Annalise descended, wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. You look serious, she said, studying his face. Is everything okay? Did you find your mother? I did, Grant confirmed. And I learned some interesting things about my family in the process. Things I'd like to share with you, over dinner, perhaps. Annalise's smile was radiant. I'd love that. Let me grab my purse. As they drove to the restaurant, Grant's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Whatever happens, remember who you are. And who you want to be. The valet took his keys at the restaurant, an exclusive place normally requiring months' advance reservations. The maitre d' greeted them warmly. Mr. Pierce, Ms. Blackwell, your table is ready. Please, follow me. Annalise raised an eyebrow as they were seated at the best table. How did you manage this reservation? Even Daddy has to call in favors here. Grant smiled, reaching for her hand across the table. That's part of what I wanted to talk to you about. Annalise, there's something you should know about me. About my family. He watched her carefully as he began his story, starting with his childhood, his mother's dual life, and finally, the truth he discovered about his family's wealth and connections. He watched for signs of prior knowledge, of calculation or deceit. What he saw instead surprised him, genuine shock, then curiosity, then a slow smile that reached her eyes. So all this time, while you were trying to infiltrate my world. You were already in mine, Grant finished. Ironic, isn't it? Annalise laughed, a real laugh that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. Does this mean I've been dating the heir to the Reed Montgomery fortune this whole time? The same fortune my father's been trying to acquire for years? It does. Grant studied her. Does that change things between us? She considered the question, her expression growing serious. It changes the power dynamic, certainly. But it doesn't change how I feel about you. She squeezed his hand. I fell for you before I knew you were wearing a uniform to dinner service, and I still want you now that I know you could buy the restaurant. Relief washed over Grant, but caution tempered his response. Did you know? About my mother, I mean. Did your father? Annalise shook her head firmly. No. Daddy's been obsessing over this mystery shareholder for years, but he never mentioned a name. He certainly never connected her to you. She paused, a flash of hurt crossing her features. Did you think I was using you to get to her? The thought crossed my mind, Grant admitted. Especially after the private investigator mentioned your father had hired him too. Dad did what? Annalise's shock seemed genuine. Grant, I swear, I had no idea. I suggested he help find your mother because you were so upset. Nothing more. Grant wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. But there was one more question he had to ask. The night we met at orientation. Was that really a coincidence? Annalise laughed softly. You mean when you spilled your entire coffee down the front of my white blouse, then tried to clean it with a napkin until I had to physically stop you from making it worse? Her eyes sparkled with the memory. That was 100% authentic disaster, Grant. No one could have planned that mortifying introduction. The tension in Grant's shoulders eased. Whatever Annalise's father might have orchestrated later, their initial meeting had been genuine. And every moment since then, every laugh, every whispered confession, every quiet moment together, had felt real too. So where do we go from here? He asked. Forward, I hope, Annalise said. But with one condition, I want to properly meet your mother. The real Natalie Pierce. Grant smiled, thinking of his mother back at their cabin, likely in jeans and a faded sweatshirt, planning her return to both worlds she inhabited. She wants to meet you too, he said. Though I should warn you, she still plans to clean houses 3 days a week. Says it keeps her perspective clear. I respect that, Annalise said, surprising him again. Anyone who can remain humble with that much power and wealth. I could learn a lot from her. As they continued their dinner, Grant felt a weight lifting. He was no longer pretending to be someone he wasn't, either the scholarship student trying to fit into wealth or the secret heir hiding his mother's legacy. For the first time since he'd started university, he was simply himself, a young man finding his way, carrying both his mother's strength and her hard-earned wisdom. But one question still nagged at him. What about your father? When he finds out who my mother is? Annalise's expression hardened slightly. Let me worry about Daddy. He's wanted me to marry well since I was old enough to date. Finding out my boyfriend is the heir to $1 billion fortune should satisfy even him. Even if that fortune belongs to his business rival. Especially then. Annalise smiled mischievously. He's always taught me that the best way to neutralize a rival is to make them family. Grant wasn't entirely comfortable with that calculation, but he appreciated her honesty. Perhaps that was the best foundation for moving forward, truth, even when it was complicated. There's something else you should know, he said, deciding to put all his cards on the table. I'm not taking the internship with your father. Or applying for the Montgomery Fellowship. Annalise looked surprised. Why not? Those opportunities would launch your career. That's just it, they'd launch the career someone else chose for me. I'm not sure that's what I want anymore. What do you want, then? Grant considered the question. During his conversations with his mother, he'd started to imagine a different path, one that combined his economics training with something more meaningful than corporate advancement. I'm thinking about nonprofit work, he said slowly. My mother's foundation does microfinancing in developing communities. Using economic principles to help people build better lives, not just bigger portfolios. He waited for disappointment to cross Annalise's face, for her to realize that the ambitious young man she'd been grooming for corporate success was choosing a different direction. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. I can see that for you. You've always cared more about the human element in our economics discussions. She grinned suddenly. Besides, that microfinancing program sounds perfect for my international development minor. Maybe they need summer interns. Grant laughed, tension he hadn't realized he was holding finally releasing. I'm sure that could be arranged. As the evening continued, they talked about real possibilities, honest aspirations, authentic versions of themselves. No more pretense, no more calculated moves. Just two people discovering if what they felt for each other could survive in the light of truth. When Grant dropped Annalise at her door later that night, her goodnight kiss felt different, not the practiced seduction of the wealthy socialite or the eager response of the ambitious scholarship student. Just a woman and a man, finding their way towards something genuine. "Tomorrow?" she asked, her eyes meeting his without artifice. "Tomorrow," he agreed. "I'll introduce you to my mother." Both versions of her. As Grant drove back to the apartment he shared with his mother, their modest home that had never been about necessity but about choice, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The shame that had driven his decisions had evaporated, replaced by a quiet pride in the woman who had raised him and the lessons she had tried to teach. Tomorrow, he would introduce Annalise to his mother, not as the maid or the billionaire, but as the woman who had shaped him, flaws, strengths, and all. And whatever came next, he would face it honestly, finally understanding that true worth had nothing to do with bank accounts or job titles. It had everything to do with character. If this story has touched your heart or made you think differently about the value of honest work and authentic relationships, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these important messages reach more people who might need to hear them. Remember, our true worth isn't measured by what we own or what we do for a living, it's measured by who we are when no one is watching. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next story. The next morning dawned clear and bright as Grant drove toward his mother's penthouse in Riverside Towers, the home she'd owned for years but rarely used. Today would mark her official coming out as Natalie Reed Pierce, businesswoman and philanthropist, though she'd insisted she would still keep her cleaning schedule for her longtime clients. "I made commitments," she'd explained when Grant questioned this decision. "Besides, Mrs. Montgomery would be lost without me. And truthfully, I'd miss the work." Grant smiled at the memory as he parked in the private garage beneath the sleek high-rise. His mother had always been stubbornly principled. Now he understood where that came from. Annalise fidgeted nervously beside him, smoothing her simple sundress. "Do I look okay? Not too formal, not too casual." "You look perfect," Grant assured her, touching her hand. "And my mother will love you for you, not for what you're wearing." The private elevator opened directly into a spacious penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The decor was tasteful but understated, quality pieces that would last generations rather than flashy status symbols. Natalie greeted them in the kitchen, where she was arranging fresh-cut flowers in a crystal vase. She wore a simple blue blouse and slacks, her hair pulled back in its usual neat style. "You must be Annalise," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I've heard so much about you." "Mrs. Pierce," Annalise began formally, then hesitated. "Or should I call you Ms. Reed?" "Natalie is fine," Grant's mother smiled. "And before we go any further, let me say something important. Whatever relationship exists between your father's company and mine is separate from what's happening between you two. I want that to be clear from the start." Annalise nodded, visibly relaxing. "I appreciate that. I was worried you might think I was, well, that my interest in Grant wasn't genuine." "Life's too short for those kinds of games," Natalie said, leading them to a sunlit dining area where brunch was laid out. "Though I must admit, I was concerned when I saw you together at the Montgomery dinner." "About that night," Annalise began, glancing at Grant. "I need to apologize. When Grant pretended not to know you, I should have questioned it immediately." "You were caught off guard," Natalie said graciously. "We all were. Still, I contributed to a hurtful situation. I'm sorry." Natalie studied the young woman for a moment, then nodded. "Apology accepted. Now, let's eat before everything gets cold." As they enjoyed brunch, conversation flowed naturally. Annalise asked thoughtful questions about Natalie's business philosophy and charitable foundation. Natalie inquired about Annalise's studies and aspirations beyond her father's company. "I've always been interested in international development," Annalise admitted. "But Daddy sees that as a hobby, not a career path. Parents often have trouble separating their dreams from their children's," Natalie observed. "Even with the best intentions." Grant caught her meaningful glance and smiled ruefully. Some lessons take longer to learn than others. After brunch, Natalie gave Annalise a tour of the penthouse, ending in a home office lined with photographs, Grant's childhood, family vacations, achievements large and small. "You've kept this whole part of your life hidden for so long," Annalise marveled, studying a photo of a younger Natalie shaking hands with a former president. "Wasn't it exhausting maintaining two separate identities?" "Less than you might think," Natalie replied. "The cleaning work kept me grounded. The business meetings kept me challenged. Both were equally important parts of who I am." "What happens now?" Annalise asked. "Will you continue working as a housekeeper now that people know the truth?" "For my regular clients, yes. Though I imagine some will find it awkward at first." Natalie smiled. "Mrs. Montgomery has known my true identity for years. She was one of the few people I trusted with the truth. That's why she seemed so interested in Grant at the dinner party," Annalise realized. "She recognized him as your son. And was probably horrified when he pretended not to know me," Natalie acknowledged without judgment. "She's been a good friend through the years." Grant winced at the memory but was grateful for his mother's forgiveness. "Speaking of recognizing people, there's something we need to discuss," he said, turning serious. "About your father, Annalise." Annalise tensed slightly. "What about him?" "James has been trying to acquire controlling interest in Montgomery developments for years," Natalie explained gently. "My shares have been the primary obstacle to his takeover attempts. Which makes me wonder if our meeting at orientation was really a coincidence," Grant finished. Annalise's face paled. "You think my father orchestrated our relationship?" She stopped, considering. "Actually, it's exactly the kind of thing he would do." "We don't know that for certain," Natalie cautioned. "But the timing is suspicious. The question is," Grant said carefully, "how do we handle this going forward? Your father doesn't know that I know about my mother's identity. Or that I know about his interest in her shares." Annalise was quiet for a moment, her expression troubled. "I need to know something first. Did you hire the private investigator to find out if I was involved? To test me?" Grant met her eyes directly. "No. I hired him to find my mother. Everything else he discovered was unexpected. And you believe me when I say I had no idea about any of this? That my feelings for you are real?" "I do," Grant said without hesitation. "Do you believe that I care about you, not your family's connections?" Annalise's smile was answer enough. She turned to Natalie with renewed determination. "As for my father, I think it's time for complete transparency. No more games, no more manipulation. What do you suggest?" Natalie asked. "A meeting. All four of us. Let's get everything out in the open once and for all." James Blackwell's expression was a study in controlled shock as he entered Natalie's penthouse 3 days later. His eyes darted from his daughter to Grant to Natalie herself, finally settling on the tasteful furnishings with a calculating assessment. "This is unexpected," he said carefully, accepting the seat Natalie offered. "When Annalise suggested a meeting to discuss Grant's future, I didn't realize we'd be gathering here." "Thank you for coming, Mr. Blackwell," Natalie said pleasantly. "I believe we have several matters to clarify." "Indeed." His gaze sharpened. "Starting with how my daughter's boyfriend happens to be the son of Natalie Reed, the mysterious shareholder who's blocked my expansion plans for the past decade." "Actually, Dad," Annalise interjected, "I think we should start with whether you encouraged me to pursue Grant because you knew who his mother was." James Blackwell's pause was a fraction too long to be genuine confusion. "That's absurd. How could I have known?" "Please don't lie, Mr. Blackwell," Natalie interrupted gently. "My investigators found the surveillance reports in your office safe. You've been watching Grant since his first semester at Westlake University." Another damning pause. "Business requires due diligence," he finally said. When I discovered a promising student with a mysterious connection to my chief competitor, of course I investigated. And encouraged your daughter to befriend him, Grant added flatly. I merely suggested Annalise show the new scholarship student around campus, Blackwell defended. What developed between you after that was your own doing. Annalise's eyes flashed with hurt and anger. You used me as a pawn in your business strategy. Your own daughter. I created an opportunity, her father corrected. Nothing more. I had no way of knowing you would develop genuine feelings for each other. But you hoped I'd gain his trust, Annalise pressed. Maybe learn something about his mother that would help you acquire her shares. Blackwell spread his hands in a gesture of concession. Business and personal matters often overlap in our world. You know this, Annalise. What I know, she said coldly, is that you manipulated me and tried to manipulate Grant for your own gain. Without any regard for our feelings. That's unfair, Blackwell protested. Everything I've done has been to secure your future. Our family's future. By using your daughter to spy on my son? Natalie asked, her voice deceptively mild. I never asked Annalise to spy. Stop, Grant interrupted. We're not here to debate the past. We're here to determine how we move forward. He glanced at Natalie, who nodded encouragingly. Mr. Blackwell, I'm withdrawing my application for the internship at your company. That would be a mistake, Blackwell frowned. Whatever you think of my methods, the opportunity is genuine. I appreciate that, but I've decided to pursue a different path. Grant explained his interest in nonprofit work and microfinancing, watching Blackwell's expression shift from confusion to calculation. Nonprofit work is a luxury, Blackwell said dismissively. One you can apparently afford, given your mother's resources. But Annalise has responsibilities to our family business. Actually, Dad, Annalise said firmly, I've been accepted into an international development program for the fall semester. In partnership with Natalie's foundation. Absolutely not, Blackwell stood abruptly. I won't allow it. I'm 21, Annalise reminded him. You don't have the authority to allow or disallow my career choices. While you live under my roof. Then perhaps it's time I didn't, she interrupted, surprising everyone in the room, including herself. She glanced at Grant, who squeezed her hand supportively. Natalie watched this exchange with thoughtful eyes before addressing Blackwell directly. James, we've known each other for many years. We were even friends once, before ambition hardened your principles. Don't presume to judge me, Natalie, he said stiffly. We simply had different priorities. Yes, we did. And we still do. Which is why I'm going to make you an offer. She leaned forward slightly. Stop pursuing my shares in Montgomery Developments. Respect your daughter's educational and career choices. In return, I'll support your River District development project with one condition: 30% of units must be affordable housing, not the token 5% you proposed. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. That would significantly reduce profits. It would create a balanced community instead of another luxury enclave, Natalie countered. The kind of development you used to believe in, before profit became your only measure of success. A complex series of emotions crossed Blackwell's face: irritation, calculation, and finally, a reluctant respect. You always were an idealist, Natalie. I prefer to think of it as principled, she smiled. Like the young developer I knew 20 years ago, who wanted to build communities, not just properties. Blackwell was silent for a long moment, considering. Finally, he sighed. 30% is excessive. 20, and I'll stop pursuing your shares. 25, Natalie countered. And you publicly support Annalise's decision to study international development. Annalise watched this negotiation with new understanding, seeing her father not as the infallible business titan she'd grown up admiring, but as a man who had lost his way pursuing wealth and power. And seeing Natalie not just as Grant's modest mother, but as a woman who had maintained her principles despite having the resources to live any way she chose. 25. Blackwell agreed finally. And Annalise can make her own decisions. But, he added, looking at his daughter, I hope you'll at least consider joining the company after you complete this program. I promise to consider all my options with an open mind, Annalise said diplomatically. As the meeting concluded and formal handshakes were exchanged, Grant felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The secrets were out. The manipulations exposed. The path forward, while not entirely clear, was at least honest. When Blackwell departed, Annalise stayed behind, reluctant to return home immediately after the confrontation with her father. That was intense, she admitted, sinking onto Natalie's couch. I've never stood up to him like that before. You did wonderfully, Natalie assured her. Setting boundaries with parents is never easy, even when it's necessary. I still can't believe he tracked Grant just to get to you, Annalise shook her head. Though I suppose I should be grateful. Otherwise, I might never have met him. She smiled at Grant, who sat beside her. Life has a way of working out, Natalie observed. Even when the path seems complicated. Later, as Grant drove Annalise back to the Blackwell estate so she could gather some belongings, she decided to stay in her campus apartment for a few days while things settled with her father. They talked about the future. Do you think he'll really respect your decisions? Grant asked. Eventually, Annalise said. Dad respects strength, even when it opposes him. I think I surprised him today. You surprised all of us, Grant admitted. In the best possible way. As they arrived at the mansion, Annalise turned to him with sudden intensity. I need you to know something. Whatever prompted our first meeting, whether it was my father's manipulation or genuine coincidence, what grew between us is real. At least for me. For me too, Grant assured her, taking her hand. Maybe that's the silver lining in all this deception. Two people manipulated into meeting, only to discover something authentic neither of them expected. Annalise smiled, leaning across to kiss him softly. Look at you, finding moral lessons everywhere. You really are your mother's son. 1 month later, Grant stood in the sunlit community center of Pinecrest, watching his mother cut the ribbon on a new microfinancing office that would serve rural communities throughout the mountain region. Beside him, Annalise beamed with pride, having helped develop the program's outreach strategy as part of her international development coursework. I still can't believe how much has changed in just a few weeks, she whispered as applause broke out. Your mother living openly as herself, my father actually following through on the affordable housing promise, you and me working together on the foundation projects. And Mrs. Montgomery still insisting that Mom clean her house every Friday, Grant added with a grin. Some things never change. Nor should they, Annalise agreed. Your mother's dedication to that work is part of what makes her extraordinary. As the formal ceremony concluded and community members gathered to learn about the new financial services available to them, Grant found himself pulled aside by one of the local farmers. Your mother's something special, the weathered man said, extending a calloused hand. Most rich folks drive through our town without stopping. She's been coming up here for years, helping folks with no expectation of thanks. She believes in honest work and treating people with dignity, Grant replied, suddenly understanding the lesson his mother had been teaching him all along. The farmer nodded approvingly. Values like that don't come from bank accounts. They come from character. He glanced toward where Natalie was deep in conversation with a young couple. You're lucky to have her example to follow. I know that now, Grant said softly. Better late than never. Later that evening, as the three of them shared dinner at the cabin that had become a weekend retreat, Grant raised his glass in a toast. To authenticity, he said, looking first at his mother and then at Annalise. And to the wisdom of valuing people for who they are, not what they own or what they do. To seeing beyond appearances, Annalise added, raising her glass. And finding worth in character, not status. Natalie smiled at them both, pride shining in her eyes. To lessons learned, even when they come the hard way. And to the courage to live truthfully, whatever form that takes. As they clinked glasses, Grant reflected on the journey that had brought them here. His shame over his mother's work had nearly cost him the most important relationship in his life. His desire to belong in a world of wealth and privilege had led him to deny his own values. But through that painful process, he discovered a profound truth: genuine worth was never found in job titles or bank accounts. It was built through integrity, compassion, and the courage to live honestly, principles his mother had embodied all along, whether scrubbing floors or directing billion-dollar investments. The path forward wouldn't always be smooth. Annalise still had much to resolve with her father. Grant was still defining his own professional direction. Natalie was adjusting to living publicly as both a business leader and a housekeeper who valued both roles equally. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with authenticity, guided by the understanding that true character reveals itself not in moments of success and admiration, but in how we treat others when no one is watching, and in whether we have the courage to stand by the people who matter most, regardless of how the world might judge them. As the evening wound down and conversation drifted to future plans, Grant found himself overwhelmed with gratitude. For his mother's unwavering principles, for Annalise's unexpected depth, and for the painful but necessary lessons that had brought him back to his authentic self. Some might see his mother's dual life as unnecessarily complicated. But Grant now understood that it had been her way of staying true to herself while navigating a world that often confused wealth with worth. Her example had ultimately taught him the most valuable lesson of all, that dignity comes not from what we own or what others think of us, but from living according to our deepest values, even when that path is neither easy nor understood. It was a lesson worth every difficult moment of their journey, and one he would carry forward into whatever future awaited them all. My friends, if this story touched your heart today, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these messages of authenticity and true worth reach more people who might need to hear them. Remember, we are not defined by our jobs or our bank accounts, we are defined by our character and how we treat others. True dignity comes from living according to our values, even when that path is difficult. Sometimes the people we judge most harshly are the very ones we should admire most deeply. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, look beyond appearances, cherish those who love you for who you truly are, and never be ashamed of honest work done with dignity and purpose.